Imagine standing on a shore, maybe 30,000 years ago. You're looking out across, I don't know, 140 miles of really rough, open ocean,
Yeah.
and you're trying to reach an island you can't even see. You've got no maps, no metal tools, certainly no modern boats. How on earth did people do that? It sounds almost impossible.
It really, really does. And that's the big mystery we're diving into today. How did our Paleolithic ancestors manage these incredibly challenging sea crossings in East Asia?
Right.
We're talking specifically about the trip from, well, modern-day Taiwan out to the Ryukyu Islands, places like Okinawa and Yonaguni.
So we'll be looking at a modern scientific expedition, right? One that used experimental archaeology and also these cutting-edge ocean simulations to try and figure this out.
Exactly.
Our mission today is to understand what it actually took. I mean, to outsmart one of the world's strongest currents, reach a place you can't see just using your wits and, I guess, sheer willpower.
You're about to find out. The main hurdle, the big obstacle here, is the Kuroshio Current.
Yes, the Kuroshio.
And this isn't, just some gentle stream. It's one of the most powerful ocean currents on the planet. It flows north at over a meter per second.
Wow.
And just to give you a sense of scale, it's about 100 kilometers wide, and it can be up to 800 meters deep. It's massive.
That sounds less like a current and more like a liquid wall you have to punch through. So given how fast and huge it is, was the first thought maybe they just got swept away, accidental drifts rather than planned trips.
That's a really good question.
Because getting caught in that sounds like you just, well, drift off forever.
And yeah, accidental drift was, for a long time, a common idea. But then you look at the destination, Yonaguni Island.
Right.
It's tiny. It's low. You absolutely cannot see it for most of the journey. A boat has to get within about 50 kilometers before the highest point, Mount Yurabu, even becomes visible.
So for a huge chunk of the trip, they're literally paddling into nothingness, visually speaking.
Exactly. No visual cues for a long, long time.
Okay, so if you've got this monster current and an invisible target, my first question is, what kind of boat could possibly do that back then? What did the research team even consider?
Well, they started with what seemed logical, right? Reed bundle rafts, bamboo rafts. The materials were there. You could probably build them with Stone Age tools.
Makes sense. And the cool thing is they didn't just guess, they actually built them and tried it out. How did those first experiments go against the Kuroshio?
Not well.
Yeah.
Not well at all, unfortunately. They did a whole series of real-world tests, and the rafts, they were just too slow. And frankly, not tough enough for that current.
So they failed.
They failed. It showed pretty clearly it wasn't just about floating. You needed a specific kind of craft, something more robust.
That's a really key finding then. So rafts are out. What was the next idea? Did they find something that worked?
They did. The breakthrough was the dugout canoe. This is sort of the last candidate on their list, and, well, it turned out to be the winner.
A dugout. Okay. But is there actual evidence of dugouts from that long ago, the Paleolithic?
That's the tricky part. Direct evidence, like finding a 30,000-year-old canoe, is basically non-existent. Wood doesn't last that long usually.
Right.
But we do find these edge-ground stone axes in places like Japan and Australia, dating back around 38,000 years.
So the tools needed to make a dugout did exist back then.
Precisely. The technology was there, which strongly suggests they could have made these kinds of boats.
So to really test this, the team went full experimental archaeology. They decided to build one. A 7.5-meter dugout canoe, they called it sujim.
Yep.
And they didn't cheat with power tools. They used replicas of 30,000-year-old stone axes.
It really makes you appreciate modern tools, doesn't it? The sheer effort involved was just immense. It took them 6 days. 6 days and over 36,000 swings of the axe.
36,000?
Just to fell the tree. That's like 12.5 hours of nonstop chopping.
I'm just picturing the blisters. My arms hurt just thinking about it. And then they had to carve it out, right? Hollow the whole thing.
Exactly. Hollow it out, shape it, and then they did the final polishing using fire and stones. They based this on actual ancient Jomon period dugouts found in Japan, which are much younger but give us clues about techniques.
So what was the finished boat like? Sushim.
It ended up being about 0.7 meters wide, 0.7 meters deep, weighed 241 kilograms, so maybe 6 people could lift it.
Okay.
Designed for 5 paddlers. And its cruising speed on calm water was around 1.08 meters per second, which is roughly 4 kilometers an hour or 2 knots.
And critically, no sails. Pure paddle power.
Absolutely critical. Human engine only.
Okay, so they have their authentic dugout, Sujim. Then came the big test, the voyage itself in 2019. 5 experienced paddlers, 4 men, 1 woman steering.
That's right.
They set off from Mushibi in eastern Taiwan, aiming for Yonaguni, 225 kilometers away. And crucially, no GPS, no compass. Just
Yeah.
sun, stars, the waves, their own feeling for the sea.
And the problem started almost immediately. As soon as they hit the Kuroshio, the sea got really rough, choppy, and the current just grabbed the boat, basically doubled its speed.
Right.
The steerer, she had to focus constantly, just fighting to keep the boat pointed correctly because the wind was trying to push them north. She couldn't even help paddle.
So one paddler effectively down already, just steering.
Yeah, and the others had to constantly adjust, turning the bow into the big waves to avoid getting swamped. It was a relentless battle right from the start.
It sounds incredibly grueling. And
Yeah.
they were out there for, what was it, 45 hours and 10 minutes?
45 hours, 10 minutes, yeah.
What was that like for the crew? What were the biggest struggles?
Well, navigating in the dark was a huge one. They were mostly going by the feel of the swells, because the stars they needed weren't always visible.
Right.
There was this moment where the steerer was so exhausted, she actually mistook city lights on the horizon for dawn and started turning north.
Oh, no.
Luckily, the captain, who just had a short break, caught it almost immediately and corrected the course. But it shows you the level of fatigue.
Definitely. And the physical toll.
Oh, it was immense. They had stomach cramps, muscle pain everywhere.
Yeah.
Terrible chafing from the paddling in the salt water. Stinging pains. Some even experienced hallucinations.
Hallucinations. Wow.
And just the psychological pressure,
Yeah.
Being surrounded by nothing but sea and clouds day after day, night after night, with the island you're aiming for still completely invisible, it must have been incredibly stressful.
I can't even imagine, but surely there were some moments that gave them a boost. Little signs of hope.
There were. At one point, they spotted a brown noddy.
A seabird.
Yeah, it's a type of tern that usually returns to land at night. Seeing one meant land had to be nearby, even if they couldn't see it yet. That was apparently a big morale booster.
A little sign from nature. And then there was this lucky drift thing. The captain decided to just stop fighting for a bit.
Yeah, basically out of sheer exhaustion, the captain decided to let the boat drift freely for a while. And it turned out to be, well, lucky. These long swells coming from the north actually pushed them closer to Yonaguni.
Amazing. Sometimes letting go is the answer.
It worked out that time, yeah.
And then eventually they saw the Yonaguni lighthouse. Obviously a modern thing, but proof they were close.
Right. The lighthouse confirmed they were on track. And then finally, the faint shape of the island itself appeared on the horizon.
Must have been an incredible sight.
Absolutely. They finally landed at Nama Beach, and the whole ordeal, as tough as it was, it proved a crucial point. A dugout canoe could make that crossing. It was possible.
But one successful trip under specific conditions doesn't tell the whole story, does it? I mean, how do you know if they could do it 30,000 years ago under potentially different conditions?
Exactly. That's where the next phase of their research comes in the computer simulations.
Okay.
Because a single experiment, it's just one data point.
Yeah.
So they ran thousands of virtual voyages.
Thousands.
Yeah, testing different starting points in Taiwan, different seasons, different ways of paddling. And critically, they simulated conditions from both modern times and the actual Paleolithic period, around 30,000 to 35,000 years ago.
How do they even simulate ancient oceans?
They used really sophisticated ocean models, things like JCOPT-A, JCOPT, and a paleo-ocean model called JCOPT. These let them reconstruct what the currents likely looked like hour by hour way back then.
That's incredible technology. So running all these thousands of virtual trips, what did they learn? What were the big takeaways?
Some really crucial things came out.
Yeah.
First, where you started from mattered a lot.
Yeah.
Launching from further north in Taiwan, specifically a place called Taroko, where you can actually see Yonaguni from the mountains on a clear day, gave a much, much higher chance of success than Mushibi, where the 2019 trip started.
Interesting. So location, 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 even back then. What about how they paddled? Did just aiming straight for Yonaguni work in the simulations?
Almost never, actually.
Yeah.
That was one of the most surprising findings. Just pointing the boat at the target and paddling like mad was usually a recipe for getting swept away by the Kuroshio.
Really? So what did work?
What worked was paddling against the current. Specifically, aiming the boat slightly south or southeast, maybe between 90 degrees southeast and 150 degrees southeast if starting from Taroko. You had to actively fight the northward push of the current.
Wow. That implies a really sophisticated understanding of the ocean, doesn't it? Not just brute force.
Absolutely. It means they likely knew about the Kuroshio, knew its strength, and knew they had to compensate for it. It required strategy.
And what about the ancient currents? Were they different back then?
The paleo simulations suggest that Kuroshio might have been even faster 30,000 years ago.
Faster. Oh, great.
Yeah, faster, but maybe shifted a bit further east, which overall would have probably made the journey even more difficult.
So that reinforces the need for that counter paddling strategy even more.
Exactly. It wasn't just helpful. Recognizing the current and having a plan to counteract it seems absolutely critical for success. This wasn't luck. It looks very intentional.
This whole picture, the voyage, the simulations, it really flips the script on the idea of primitive Stone Age people, doesn't it? It points strongly towards intentional seafaring, not just accidental drift.
Wha- Completely.
Right.
It paints them as, uh, the researchers call them real challengers.
Mm.
People who achieve something truly extraordinary with pretty basic technology, relatively speaking.
So what did success depend on? It sounds like a mix of things.
It really does. You needed the right technology, the dugout canoe.
Hmm.
You needed advanced navigation skills, reading the sun, the stars, the swells, the wind.
Right.
And then there are the human factors.
Hmm.
Incredible determination, courage, definitely teamwork, and good leadership on the boat. The research also stressed that everyone who could paddle well, didn't matter if they were men or women, young or old, was vital.
It makes you wonder, though, how did they get that knowledge? How did they learn about the currents, how to navigate offshore?
The thinking is it probably came from coastal fishing.
Hmm.
They likely spent a lot of time near the shore, maybe venturing out further and further. And Taiwan's coast has these really high mountains, right? They'd be visible from quite far out at sea. So you could paddle out, practice navigating, and always have this big landmark to guide you back. That builds experience and confidence.
That makes sense. Build up the skills gradually. But given how hard the crossing was and how strong the current is, does this mean these were likely one-way trips, not commutes?
That's the strong feeling, yes.
Yeah.
Getting back against the Kuroshio without a much broader understanding of ocean circulation would have been incredibly difficult, maybe impossible for them.
So they were setting out, knowing they might not be coming back.
It certainly seems that way, which just underlines the sheer guts and commitment involved. They weren't just popping over for a visit. They were migrating, pushing into the unknown.
And looking at the bigger picture, beyond just this one crossing, what does this tell us about human expansion way back then?
It shows that developing this kind of advanced seafaring technology, the dugout canoe, was really key, alongside other things like, inventing fish hooks and better fishing gear. These things together allowed for what researchers call the first full-scale human expansion across the oceans, certainly in this part of the world, the Western Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about surviving where they were. It was a deliberate, strategic push into new territories.
So this deep dive, it's really, it's pulled back the curtain, hasn't it, on just how incredibly ingenious and strategically brilliant our Paleolithic ancestors could be, and just how tough they were.
Absolutely. They weren't just reacting to their environment. They were actively taking on these huge natural challenges, figuring out ways to overcome them to expand their world.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other seemingly impossible things did early humans manage that we just don't know about yet? And maybe what can we learn today, in our world where everything seems so easy and instant, from their capacity for that kind of active strategic challenge when faced with the completely unknown?
It's a fascinating thought, that enduring human spirit of exploration facing the unknown, it clearly goes back a very, very long way.
Definitely something to ponder. Consider the legacy of these ancient mariners, these pioneers, and what their incredible journeys tell us about the drive to explore.